All right, is this on? Can you guys hear me all right? All right, first off, apologies for missing yesterday. It was my wife's, I won't tell you how old she is, but it was her birthday, and I had bought tickets a long time ago to a show called Wicked, and I thought if I missed that, then I would be in a lot of trouble. So I will tell you, I was really interested in coming to speak and share some time with you because of the topics that you're discussing. And I also went through a couple of the folks that were going to attend. I saw Dove, I saw Sunil here, and then I scrolled down and I saw Larry Whiteside's picture on there. And Larry Whiteside, I had met him, and if you guys don't know him very well, he will keep you in stitches. And he's a guy that you totally want to go drink beer with in the evening. So I said, I've got to go, I've got to come. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. To kind of set this up, I'll give you a little bit of background on me and why this topic is interested, and the topic itself is about, is there a way for us to look at employees that work for us, not from a keystroke and what they do online and on the internet every day, but how they act? Are there ways for us to look at some of the behaviors that they exhibit, and also, from a philosophical perspective, is there a way to keep good people from turning bad? What is that period of time that they start to transition and start to make bargaining with themselves, that taking something or intellectual property or sensitive data from the company elsewhere? So first I want to ask all of you that this is what I expected was a bit of an interaction between you and me. So I wanted to ask everybody, are you willing to share? Are you ready to contribute to the discussion? So first thing is, how many of you in the audience are INTJs? So nobody knows? Okay, good. Yeah, all right. Well, how many of you are comfortable lying? That's pretty good. Half of you are telling the truth. That's good. Well, my background, I'll tell you, is one of the reasons why I got interested in all of this was I spent 10 years as a SEAL, as an operator, destroying things, tearing up things, creating mayhem. Loved it. It was a great job. Then the next 10 years I spent as an intelligence operation officer, where they allow you to lie, steal, and cheat, and do anything you want for our nation, which I totally enjoyed. So that was 20 years of total destruction, really enjoying how to tear things apart. But then over time I thought, well, how do we protect ourselves from people like myself? And one of the issues I came up with, well, what's valuable within a company, and how do we do that? First thing I'd like to start with is a couple of statistics. And this has to do, we'll roll through about 4 of them, have to deal with the disengagement process. Through research, about 70% of your employees are disengaged. That means they're not really there when they're there. So when they're a disengaged employee, what are the things that happen? People start to drift, they start to think about other things and not quite being loyal to the company itself. But as employers, we think that most of the time people leave the organization because they want more money. But in fact, they leave because they're not engaged. They don't like what they're doing. We as an organization aren't responding to them very well, so they decide to leave. What I'll also tell you is that if you have employees that are engaged at work, you're 2.5 times more profitable to the organization. So if there's a way for us to keep employees engaged or be able to determine more accurately when they stop being engaged at work, can we start pushing them back? Because once you start going down that path of deciding to leave the organization, that's when the risk happens that a person is going to take intellectual property with them as they leave the organization. And here's the last stat. These folks they don't necessarily want to do harm to the organization, but they also don't want to be there. And so they start talking to themselves and they start to decide, well, I created certain things. Do I own it? Everybody else is doing it. It's not quite marked the way I thought it should be marked, so therefore I'll take it. So employee disengagement means that you're going to lose employees. It also means that you're going to have a higher increase of data loss, and that translates into lost revenue. So can we see employees leave or start to to disengage before our eyes. And what actually happens. So what do we know? So what I'd like to do is ask some of you, what are the steps that you've taken as you head out the door? And I'll go ahead and share one that I have, and then I'll kind of get the juices flowing. One is that I need my contacts. I need to know folks that I've interacted with over time. So I'm going to download my contacts. I'm going to take that with me. If there's a specific, I'll share one more. If there's a specific spreadsheet that I've spent hours creating and building, I may wipe out the data, but I'm going to still take the spreadsheet with me. Probably not a good thing to do. So what are the other things in the group that you do as you decide to, listen, I'm going to transition out the door. I'm going to pick on Sunil here first. That's right. That's a good one. It's an important one. So you start lose engagement with the boss themselves. Email stop the flow. What else?
We start to care about more organizations like the team meeting and the all hands and whatnot.
Okay, good. Yep. Deadlines. All right. What else?
Something really different. I started preparing documentation and my work.
What do you do with the documentation? That's a good one. No one's ever said that one.
When I knew I was going to leave, I started creating documentation because I knew I was going to be replaced and there was no guidance on how to do my thing.
Good one. Who else? Yep.
Identify individuals having meetings or having association with folks that have associations prior.
Okay.
So you make your track and trace, so you're making meetings outside the building or things outside your current scope.
Yeah, so unusual kind of interactions with folks.
Well, you update your LinkedIn profile.
Some people do that before they actually leave, which is a total dead giveaway. All right.
You start working in a collaborative environment, you disengage from sharing this with the rest of the group.
Okay. Next. You had your hand up?
Downloading all of your content.
Man, that happens all the time. I mean, I tell you right now, I'm the security solutions architect for Harris Corporation, and I will tell you that's the number one thing. People will, listen, I'm going to download everything off my C drive onto an external hard drive, and the answer we usually get is, well, I had a lot of personal stuff on there. It's going to take me hours to tangle all of that, so they suck it all in, and we're like, hey, there's consequences. Now you're going to have to pay the piper. Yep. Yeah, that's good. I will also say that it's interesting. Most people think that people shorten their hours. Sometimes they lengthen their hours. Sometimes people that worked a lot of hours, they worked irregular hours. All of a sudden, they start to work exact hours. Like I come in at 8 o'clock, I'm leaving at 4 o'clock, and that's it. So I think, as I kind of take this journey on, what are those external things? Because there's a lot of user behavior analytics tools out there, but they're all most of them are associated with, what are they doing on the net itself? Keystrokes. But I think there's behaviors that we can pick up on to allow us to see these changes or interrupt that process as it goes forward. I think there's also some benefits to this, whether it's could you identify where groups of people are all starting to disengage, and can you kind of look at, well, what's the problem? Is it a manager or so forth? Can you reduce the cost of turnover? So how much does it cost to replace an executive or an engineer on your department? How much loss of productivity do you have? Are there cases of workplace violence that you can also stop or interrupt or be able to see? So I think there's great value in kind of monitoring things besides just what happens on the keystrokes. So we know ourselves. We know the value of people and data. We know that you look at a value of an organization, it is both tangible assets like property, but also intangible assets. For example, intellectual property, your processes, your patents. It could be also associated with things like just-in-time suppliers. So who are your suppliers, your reputation. All those things are intangible. Most of the value in an organization is in its intangible assets, its people and its data. So again, this points back to both of those. I don't think we have enough time to do this, but I wanted to, if I could, get you all to participate in a survey. And fortunately, the computer's not working. I don't have very good access to the internet to show you the results. But if you did go with me back afterward, give me your business card, I'm happy to share the results with you. And it's about 15 questions. It'll take you probably 5 minutes to actually do itself. So again, I'm happy to share with you the results here. I'm not going to leave this up too long, but if you want to get with me later, I can give you the access to that. Sunil, did you get it? He's fast. Okay. So when does this all occur? So the first process for me was I can't manage what I can't measure, and I can't measure what I can't define. So how do I define one of the key elements to this, and that is when? So and this is notional. This is something that is for discussion. And as you kind of review this, the top line is the departure. Is it continuous? It's the normal employment every day. It goes across from 2 to 3 months from departure all the way to the right, where 1 month, 2 to 4 weeks, and so forth, until you get last day. And then sometimes we don't necessarily shut off VPN access or change passwords, and sometimes we lose data after an employee departs. The next part is the level of risk, where I thought most of the risk was, and from my experience, and it's just my experience, is the last day. People start to bargain with themselves to say, this is my last opportunity to take data with me. I'm going to take it. I'm going to go ahead and there's numerous times where people have just copied their whole entire C drive because it's the last opportunity, and they ran out of time to kind of collect their thoughts and plan a good exit. And then the level of risk, how much are we actually losing in data? I would say that 80% of your data loss is really in the 1 month to the 1 week after an employee leaves. So if we can get ahead if we can start to discover an employee is about to leave, that means that we can look at, and looking at these factors themselves, we can look at, well, how can we improve this? Or how do we stop the flow of data outside of our organization? So whether it's education, and we say maybe there's an opportunity for us to constantly engage with folks that work for our organizations and say, insider threat is bad, whether it's a poster or whether it's a tabletop tent in the cafeteria. But education is certainly key. Policies, review the policies that we have around data sharing and data exfiltration. The procedures. So when an employee leaves an organization, what are those procedures that we follow? There's a list of things that should be done. And then there's always technology. This group is heavy in the technology. What are those systems that we can build, whether it's machine learning or utilizing high-performance computers to be able to look at trends and the non-obvious things that we don't see and be able to see them sooner than most folks. And all of this kind of ties into the culture. And that's really the holy grail, is to establish a culture within an organization, ties the education, the policies, the procedures, and the technology together to where a company is much, much stronger in understanding when an employee is about to depart the organization, or when we see them starting to turn bad and starting to make, or start to bargain with themselves and whether it's okay to take data itself. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor to any questions that you have. Yes, sir.
It's an interesting path. I mean, you're primarily looking at it from data loss. But have you ever considered maybe trying to flip it and look at retaining employees instead, or some way to motivate them? Because honestly, trying to find talent nowadays is pretty hard. The market's so hot, it's hard to find and retain people.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely one of the goals here. The goal here is, you look at, well, what else can this thing do? If you can actually retain folks, it's usually about at least a whole year's worth of salary to replace somebody, whether it's the recruiting cost, the loss in productivity. So if we can have an opportunity to turn them, because the competition is strong for folks that are data scientists or engineers. So if we can incentivize them to stay with a bonus or some other means, it's probably going to be a lot less than replacing them at 1 year's worth of salary. So that's a good point. You also jog my a thought on what I also want to do is not look at loss as a motivator here. I want to look at value. And is there a way to increase the value of an organization? Whether it is, if an employee is engaged, you're 2.5 times more productive as an organization. The reputation of an organization is being secure and tight. How does that go into the business development and the business assurance model? So how can you assure your customers that you are? And it's one of the questions I asked Harris too. I said, are we more secure than Apple as an organization? And if we're not, why not? And what are the benefits of being a really, really secure organization? So good points.
One quick comment. So when you look at the matrix that I presented yesterday, and you apply the user domain, and you say, what do I do to identify their attack surfaces or their weaknesses or their propensity to leave? How do I patch that by protecting that? Basically, how do I address those concerns that would cause them to leave? Right? So the whole notion of identify and protect, what we do with our devices and our applications, we actually want to do with our people as well. So the proactive action that you're talking about is also what we capture. When you think about what are the things, the actions and activities we need to do to prevent somebody from leaving, which is, again, post-event. So once somebody chooses to leave, then there's a whole series of actions, but there's a lot of preventative actions you can do there. And Matrix calls that out for us, where we say we got to think about that particular space, because we don't want people to leave, but we want to understand what might be the causes for them to leave.
Good question.
So you repeated the more engaged companies, employees have higher profits. Do you think that that's a cause and effect thing, or do you think have you controlled for the sectors, or is it that like retail employees turn out not to be super engaged, and retail is a lower profit margin business than say consulting or finance?
I don't think that was in the research. If you go back to the slides of how we're finding that data, I don't think it calls out exactly what kind of business segment they were talking about. But I think it probably could be a little less for like retail employees, a little more for like C-level or corporate type employees. So good question.
So kind of statement, so I have a Marine Corps background, so curious to the military side. Wouldn't you agree that a lot of the motivation and integrity comes from the leadership that is not being trained, not being educated to help drive their teams? So if I manage to see 70 people, I'm trying to lead by example, trying to drive that culture. It's that here, where my team is in step is what the goal is. Looking at it after the fact and saying, all right, these assets are at risk, perhaps these assets could be taken by the person when they leave. But it comes to a conversation that those assets certainly identified prior to the conversation, right? So you already have a known component of saying, you're working on this project, you're working on this data set. I know that this is really, really valuable. So, if you're working on my team to begin with, you have the integrity to be here. You don't need to touch the projects. It's the bigger thing. And technology exists, but it sort of comes down to the human side. Right?
Oh, sorry, Dick, we're way out of time.
These are all great questions. I appreciate everyone's feedback. So, feel free to reach back to me during the conference itself. I'd love to talk to you more about this.